Yeah, I don't think there. It was a preconceived concept beyond that. Although I think that maybe one thing that we were looking for that became apparent to us while we were working on this record was that, we very much were conscious of the fact that we wanted to, check back in with it, because we did it over the course of several years. It gave us time to check back into it and see if things were sort of continuing to engage us emotionally, and we wanted to make sure that we were kind of with it the whole time. We never wanted to feel like we were falling out of favor with it, or that things seemed like they were of a time and now seemed old. So I think that there was a timelessness that, it's tough to manufacture that, but I think that's something that we want, we want out of it. I think in like to mirror the friendships that we've had for a long time, where we kind of are happy that we, are still in contact and that we're resonating with one another still. I think that we hope to still resonate with this music down the line as well.
It's not about a past relationship. I think it's about, Josh and Matt wrote the music to that song one afternoon, and it was included on, after a studio session, I went home with recordings of everything that we'd worked on as a band, and that little, track was on this CD of songs. So the first time I heard it, I just kind of felt that it was really a special track, with a very kind of airy, beautiful, pleasant, nostalgic kind of feeling towards it. So I wanted to write something that felt really in sync with the vibe that the track gave me, and it was like an instant favorite for me. So I took a while, but then eventually I was at the beach and I was catching up with a friend of mine who was moving his family to a very remote part of Panama, like really in the middle of nowhere. And this guy kind of has a similar background to me. He's from the States, but he's sort of just like gone further and further towards the wilderness and sort of surf life. And he had this really infectious joy about him. Like he was really, really excited about taking his family to this very removed place. And it was just the kind of emotion and sentiment that was very inspirational to me in that moment. Sort of like, man, I really, what a beautiful thing. This person's hope and kind of positivity for the future is so contagious and great. And that's kind of what inspired the opening lyrics and the chorus. So it's really actually more about just, I suppose, taking joyful steps towards one's own happiness is kind of the gist.
I don't know. I mean, that started off as something that I was tinkering with on my own at my studio, and then I shared it with Matt and Paul at a session, and they contributed their voices to it, and we arranged it together. I think there's I don't know, I actually don't think of that one as being very psychedelic, but I guess the fact that there is this slide guitar melody that Paul sings to, and those two things become like a voice together, does kind of make it an outlier on the record. It just has a different kind of tone. The voice opens up a lot more in the chorus, and you can kind of hear what Paul's saying. It's like more defined, but I think in the verses, it's like there is this strange sort of marriage of the guitar and the voice to make one sound together.
I mean, I think the sky just kind of, for the character in that song, represents, like, that's their higher power that they're speaking with, kind of, so it could be their God or their, Mother Nature. So yeah, I think that's the metaphor. It's really just sort of a spiritual quest that has some sort of, again, I feel like psychedelic overtones to it, and kind of like the acid trip, or, ayahuasca kind of thing, or peyote, and kind of vision quest through the desert. So I think it's a pretty traditional trope, and it's really just, kind of asking for some guidance from a desperate point of view.
I'm in the middle of work. Hi there. Can I talk to you in a little bit? Thanks. Okay. Sorry. It's the sinking faith in this choking secret. Trained to think That was a working title, right, Paul? That just kind of hung around. You know, sometimes, like, so for instance, on Patchouli, we had, I think we had all just sort of come back inside from taking a little break and just sat down our instruments and just sort of improvised together, you know, without much plan musically. Just sort of, instead of discussion about what kind of music we were about to sit down and create, we just sort of let the instruments sort of guide it. And so Patchouli was just born of an improvisation. So I like to think of it as sort of like a subconscious composition that then Paul wrote lyrics to. So I guess there's sort of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of representation there of like this classic dorm room hippie incense. And this sort of like, you know, a bunch of guys in a room kind of like, you know, strumming acoustic guitars and like, you know, Bob Marley poster on the wall or something, you know.
It's not directly inspired by any particular recent life event, no, but I do think that one kind of, maybe at that point in time when we were working, there was a lot of introspection going on and just kind of reflecting on one's own life. But I think there's a lot of songs that kind of work with that tension between sort of feeling a little bit of regret and or unease with regards to one's past, and then with a sort of like hope for the future. And I think that song in particular kind of has quite a triumphant attitude about sort of rebirth and rejuvenation and a kind of return to sort of some kind of purer previous state. So like however far you may have come down some road of or you've lost your way, there's sort of always a way back, is kind of, I think, the essence of that.
Oh, that's not me. That's Paul singing. But there are some other voices in there, so it's not totally. We can go down that road. The other voices in there.
You're in there.
I'm in there. I'm singing in there. Oh yeah, I am singing in there a little bit, and you know, leading the charge. But I think there's a lot I can let Paul talk about that song in terms of where he was coming from lyrically. But one thing that's always worth mentioning about that song is the nature sounds on that recording, the birds and the wind and the, you know, the sound of the leaves and the wind and stuff like that. That's all captured as part of the piano track. So when Matt and I were recording the drums and the piano together, we had the window open in the studio, and so all those sounds from the surrounding property were coming in on those microphones. So, you know, the interaction between the piano and the birds and Paul, there's like several voices happening there, and some of them are just purely sort of nature chiming in. So I think that kind of, you know, those sounds were not then, they weren't set over the music afterwards as an afterthought in terms of a production idea. They were part of the basic tracking.
Yeah, I mean, it was written before all of that, but it does seem to, I think the chorus is, you know, especially do kind of talk of, you know, a bit of a sort of imagery of, you know, riots and revolution and sort of building a better future and stuff. But it was written before. And I think it's another kind of odd song in the sense that I think it also begins like it begins kind of just romantic. And then I feel like, again, it's sort of like the way that I think, I don't know, it's like there's a narrative of a relationship, and then there's like the larger narratives that surround a relationship. And I feel like in this song, it's kind of like those two things kind of coming together, kind of like there's like this calm and peace in this, in just a domestic romantic relationship that, you know, has sort of had its ups and downs and maybe is even in decline. And then the chorus kind of happens, and it's sort of more about this larger narrative. Yeah, I think relative to world events at the moment, it's an interesting song, the way that the lyrics sort of fit what's going on.
Well, Chubby Checker wrote "Let's Do the Twist," and then the next year he wrote "Let's Twist Again" like we did last summer. How cool is that? Two songs, one dance. Pretty cool.
Chubby Checker was a song that had just existed as like an instrumental that we'd sort of done kind of like just spontaneously one day in the studio together. But it was an instrumental that had a really great quality to it that I think kind of stayed with all of us. So also like towards the end of making this record, I finally kind of sat down and finished writing vocals for it. And I think at that point we'd been referring to it as Chubby Checker for a long time, and the lyric that got applied to that song is quite serious. And I think the idea for us of changing the title from what we were used to something derived from the lyrics and then kind of making that whole piece be like sort of serious, it felt like it would be in the whole scope of the record. We wanted to leave a little bit of the kind of Muzz goofiness and sort of fun that we had in the studio making this record, and like one way to do that was just to say, fuck it, let's leave Chubby Checker as the title of this song. That song was also kind of like in the way that Knuckle Duster was written with Matt and Josh long before Muzz was even a band. This was a song that I was working on with Matt before Muzz was a band. And yeah, it was just a chord progression that Matt kind of decided to lay that sort of crazy, what does he call it, Josh?
Garage rumba
style of beat to it. And I think once he kind of had a beat that he was having fun with, then we kind of really got some good momentum working on that track. Josh wound up, I think, playing my guitar parts anyway on that song. I don't even know if I play guitar on that one.
I can't remember. I have a memory of tracking it with you on guitar.
Well, anyway, we made it much more Muzzy when we all got together, and then Josh laid down that kind of amazing guitar solo. And the lyrics on that one are, you know, I like the lyrics to that one. That one, it's almost like the guy from Red Western Sky, but while he's really tripping.
This one like had the arrangement of this one changed quite a bit over time, but I think the instrumental of it remained constant. Is that right, Paul? Like we had kind of gone back and forth a lot on some different vocal approaches, but the original sort of like soundtrack of it remained. It started off pretty obtuse, right? There's something about Alice and
there was some
birds
weird,
and there's some weird imagery. And it just sort of, I think there was just like a longing and a nostalgia that was happening in that main section of the song that drew us in, and we just wanted to explore that more.
I work in the city, hoping to find a new friend.
For me, what I was referring to with how many days, it occurs to me that it's kind of like what the surrealists talked about, like automatic writing, where they just sort of, you know, that's like the real-time idea of just like without sort of trying to develop a thought and then refine it into words. It's kind of just like letting the words come out of you. And I think the idea is that somehow in our subconscious, there's like this well of understanding and meaning, and sort of language is just tied in with like, I kind of feel like sometimes things are just there to be received rather than composed. That was an instance, All Is Dead to Me, where it was just like I heard the song and the chorus just came to me instantly, and then it was one of these things where I was not really sure. I was going to rewrite the lyric, and then ultimately I decided, you know, that there's something very pure about this, and that the emotional quality of the chorus can only come across with that lyric, whether or not it was my favorite lyric when I wrote it or not. It was just like, but there's a mood that is happening with this lyric, and I'm just going to keep it. And I think the verses, it was one of these songs where I felt like I was just describing a character in a film who's sort of in an urban landscape down on their luck, and then the chorus becomes this kind of melodramatic, bit, you know, self-pitying hook. Yeah, I don't know what else I could say about that. It's definitely not autobiographical. It's not, you know, from my experience. It's just kind of, I mean, it's from within me, but more from a exploration of a mood, I would say. Trinidad was not, you know, nothing was written during any of the lockdown or any of that. It was all written prior. We recorded an acoustic version of Trinidad while we've been in lockdown. But yeah, that was just a song that I kind of wrote and half finished. And then Josh was really helpful in kind of completing it. I think it was a song that I didn't really know what to do with or if it was done or not. And it was good because we kind of just found that, like, I think rather than trying to build it up further, I think we just decided to leave it as this kind of like wispy, brief piece of music that kind of like exists in a small space. And so I just think it's a very live piece of music that's not overworked. And I think it has a very simple emotional message to it that is very sincere.